Welcome everyone to the 10th meeting of the Civic Works Committee. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing and advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca. At this time, I would like to ask for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent items. I have had a request for 2.1 to be pulled. I've heard of no others. Anyone would like anything to be pulled, please let me know now.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Councillor Van Meerbergen, I can hear you. Go ahead.
If we could pull 2.5 and 2.6, I'd like to vote on those separately, please.
Okay. Any others? Seeing none, then I would like to put 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.7, 2.8, 2.9, 2.10, 2.11 and 2.12, looking for a motion to receive those. Your Worship, and a seconder, Councillor Lewis. Any questions or comments? Councillor Lewis, and then I've got Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to note with regard to our agenda here that we have on 2.7, new traffic, pedestrian, and cyclist signals. I know it's always a concern in the community. I've been working on a couple of projects in my own ward, but I know that this is happening in wards across the city. People wanting to know that they have safe ways to travel across intersections. And I just think it's important to highlight the work that our staff continues to do all over the city to do what they can to make our pedestrian and cycle lanes and traffic intersections safer. We don't have the ability to fix it all at once, but we are working away on this. And I just want to draw to the public's attention that when these issues are raised, we do pay attention and we do work on them. I know it's not always as fast as people would like, but we are making progress there. And I want to thank Ms. Scher and her staff for all the work that they do around these issues.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me too. I, along with Councillor Lewis, would also like to acknowledge staff's work on 2.7 with the new traffic and pedestrian cyclist signals that I'm hoping will be approved today at committee. I know in my area there is a traffic signal at Pack Road and Colonel Talbot that is going forward with this in this recommendation, and with the West End and in particular the subdivisions that are going on in the area, Silverleaf, and the continuation of Talbot subdivision as well. The concentration is growing, and the need for traffic signaling and moving safely in our community is very important. So thank you to staff for bringing these things forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, then I will put it to the vote, and I will be going for oral votes on this, starting with the mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy. Councillor Cassidy is having some issues with her computer. She's going to be coming in shortly, so I will go to Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Yes.
I vote yes. And let's give Councillor Cassidy a minute or two here so she can register her vote. Councillor Cassidy, I understand you're back online, and we are voting now on the consent items. I'm not too sure when you dropped, but we're voting on 2.2 to 2.4 and then 2.7 all the way through to 2.12. So can I have a yay or nay?
Sorry. Yeah, as I was just coming in, my computer decided it needed to reboot. I don't know why I did that. So thank you for waiting for me. And I vote yay.
Okay, thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
We will now move to consent item 2.1, Killaley Southeast Basin Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, a notice of completion. I think I'll go to Councillor Pelosa on this because I think she wants to address this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Advanced wording was sent to staff in regards to adding on a clause D. Could I just ask the clerk to read it out for those who would not have seen it yet?
To the clerk.
Through the chair, the new clause D reads that the Civic Administration be directed to initiate an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to implement the recommendations of the subject lands status report and EIS for the Killaley South East Basin Municipal Class Environmental Assessment.
Thank you for that. This wording has gone through staff and the clerk prior to recognizing this area has a lot going on with swimming, the storm water management, the Clark Road Bridge, and these projects are 10 years apart, but very significant in this area as there's species at risk. There's natural heritage features in this area. And it's going to affect the official plan zoning as well regarding this significance for heritage. I believe Councillor Hopkins has joined us today at committee and may want to speak to this as well, or staff. Mr. Chair.
Any others that would like to speak to this? Your Worship.
Yes, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that the clerk has just read that out. Through you, Chair, to staff, I'd like to know the implications of the amendment has been suggested.
I'll go to Ms. Chambers on that.
Through the chair, yes, staff does support this recommendation. It was brought to my attention by the planning department after the report was submitted that it's important when an environmental impact study identifies basically patches that are significant, that the next step in that process would be a recommendation at the time of the EA being completed for staff to then go and pursue the official plan amendment and the zoning changes, and that will follow its own public process, but that this is kind of the time to trigger that direction to staff.
So, Chair, through you, if I can. So, did staff indicate that they? I heard them say. I heard the comments that they support the recommendation. Was that the staff recommendation or the amendment, or both?
If I may, Mr. Chair, staff are supportive of both, and we will be amending our internal process to ensure that this becomes part of all of our EA conclusions, as Ms. Chambers mentioned.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Cassidy, did I see your hand up there? No, okay. Councillor Hopkins? You have your hand up. Not too sure if you wanted to speak to this.
Yes, and forgive me, Mr. Chair, if I understand there's two resolutions coming forward. I have passed on a resolution to Councillor Pelosa, but I'm not exactly sure.
That's what's before us.
Are we speaking on both resolutions? I just want clarification before I speak.
Okay, my understanding is that there's one motion before us that would, I believe, would address what you're talking about, but I'm going to go to Councillor Pelosa for further clarification.
Thank you. As per Councillor Hopkins' conversations with me in regards to this, this is the one that's before us as a clause D.
Councillor Hopkins, do you want to comment on that. Did you see the motion or?
No, I don't. And I guess this is part of the problem because I did pass on a motion regarding the importance of reviewing, doing a, initiating an ecological assessment between the two projects. I know there is another resolution there to change our OP as well as our bylaws to indicate the heritage feature of this area. So I guess since you're recognizing me, I would like to speak to the committee and encourage you to support this. It is very important. This is and it is a sensitive area as well. And with the EA, it has determined the importance and the importance of as we undertake these projects. And one is the swim ponds, the other is the Clark Road Bridge, 10 years difference. The need to do another assessment in this area is important. I understand staff acknowledge that as well. And I really do want to thank them for their support and advocacy for this natural feature as well. But I am hoping this committee will understand the need the uniqueness of this area and the need to do these assessments as we move forward with these projects. So I would encourage the committee to support the resolution.
So, Councillor Hopkins, clarify, you're just speaking to like encouraging committee members to support Clause D here, or is there something like I'm a little confused here. I want to make absolutely clear that we're not talking about two different things.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I want to make sure we understand what we're talking about. And I know there is a resolution to change the OP and the bylaw to take into account the heritage feature. As well, I understood that the committee would have to bring forward a resolution to undertake and initiate the ecological assessment projects moving into the future. So I understood it as two different, C and a D, but if you could give me clarification, and obviously to the committee that is going to have to vote on this.
Councillor Pelosa, as you introduce to you and get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you. Anything regarding the official plan rezoning that would come from the planning department, I don't have wording from that for staff. This was just strictly the motion that Councillor Hopkins and I discussed this morning that I brought forward.
So I'm going to ask for any comments or questions on the motion that is in front of it as it stands. And then we're going to go from there. Your Worship.
Thank you, Chair. I'm prepared to support the motion at hand, but I'm getting a little nervous about introducing motions without advance notice, dialogue, chat, discussion, what have you. Councillor Squire would be the first to say amongst us, and I'm confident he would, that the things being sent in, it makes it awkward. I mean, we're all trying to do the best job we can, but I think for it to have a good vetting by staff and opinions to councillors on these potential amendments. So, you know, I can accept the First Amendment, and the other might well be totally appropriate, but I'm starting to get my spider sense up a little bit here.
Do I have any other comments or questions regarding the motion that's in front of us? No. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate motions coming forward at the last minute aren't desirable, but I would like to remind this committee, this is where motions do happen. This is where debate happens, and this is where conversation happens. And I would like to through you, Mr. Chair, go to staff and ask for their comments on the motion that I have asked Councillor Pelosa to bring forward, and also the motion coming from planning. So if I may do that through you, Mr. Chair.
So the way I'd like to do this is I want to go ahead and have a vote on the motion at hand. And then I will go to committee members. I will go to you first, Councillor Cassidy. I will go to committee members after that vote to see if there is a be made based on Councillor Hopkins' questions. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just heard from staff. I heard that they support this. I heard that it was somewhat of an oversight. It's a logical next step. The D part that Councillor Pelosa has brought forward after consulting with Councillor Hopkins, that the D part is a natural next step that would happen and should happen. And I also heard the city engineer say that they will change their processes to always follow this same four-part procedure going forward. So I'm fully supportive of this motion, and I'm happy to second Councillor Pelosa's motion as well if you need a second. Okay, the motion has been emailed to all the committee members. The clerk has already read it out. If there are no other further comments or questions, I will go to a vote on the motion in front of us, beginning with the mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Now, I will go to the committee to see if, based on Councillor Hopkins' comments, to see if anyone would like to propose a motion, and if there's a seconder to that motion. Councillor Cassidy.
So this is the part where I think we're kind of wading into unknown territory. I really don't know what the motion would be. It feels like D might have accomplished a lot or most of what Councillor Hopkins was looking for. I think if there's an amendment that Councillor Hopkins would like to make at the council meeting, then that would be a good idea for Councillor Hopkins to talk to the city engineer or Ms. Chambers and figure out exactly what amendment needs to be made and circulate that in advance of the council meeting and bring it to council.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions regarding this issue in front of us? Councillor Hopkins, I don't see your hand up, but I'll invite you if you want to speak to it one more time. I will invite you to do so.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak. And thank you for supporting the recommendation, adding the D clause to change our OP and zoning bylaw amendment. I would like to bring forward another motion that I have passed on to Councillor Pelosa. I understand I cannot do that. I do not sit on the committee. I kind of sense that the committee would like more information. So I appreciate Councillor Cassidy's suggestion that I will be bringing forward my additional motion. I would like to encourage the committee to follow up with staff to understand the importance of doing this initial initiating the ecological assessment between these two projects. I know the executive summary that you have received doesn't go into the details, and I don't think this is getting into the weeds, but I would encourage you all committee members to understand the uniqueness of this area, the importance of these two projects, the timing of these two projects, and the understanding to deal with the ecological assessment that's needed. Staff understand that. I know they are prepared to do that, but I think it is also incumbent upon us to understand all the changes that are happening and will be happening in this area going into the future, and the importance that we look at the sensitivity of this area. And I am quite frankly disappointed that there isn't more of a conversation here and a need to understand more. And I will be bringing this forward again at council. So thank you for allowing me to make these comments.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll look to committee members if there's any further points they'd like to make or motions they'd like to make. Councillor Plaza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had sent wording this morning as well in regards to this one to Mr. Turner. Wondering if you could pull that up for members. It's that staff be directed to initiate a review of combined environmental impacts related to the Clark Road Bridge rehabilitation, the proposed stormwater management projects to ensure a comprehensive assessment of sustainability is completed prior to construction of municipal projects based on the findings of the subject land status report and EIS, the Kaleli South East Basin Municipal Clack environmental assessment. And that is also the motion that I had shared with you as well, Mr. Chair, this morning, thereby didn't want to breach quorum and circulate things around differently, but this was relating to the impacts that are there in regards to species at risk and understanding the environmental significance of this area as there's wetlands, woodlots, and it's going to be a major development going forward.
So, Councillor, are you making that motion?
Sorry, yes, I'm moving that motion and the asking that the clerk pull that up on wording as well on the big screen for Councillor Hopkins and anyone else viewing could have an opportunity to see it as well.
Your Worship.
I strongly object to something this significant that requires the kind of thoughtful discussion that I will absolutely agree with Councillor Hopkins. She's right. Thoughtful dialogue, not to be brought into the meeting during the meeting, but to give us a chance on council to be able to review, consider. This may be the absolutely right thing at the right time, at the right place. But I absolutely object to this being brought in. At some point, colleagues, we have to take a stand about preparation and being ready so that we can have the kind of thoughtful dialogue just heard that we should all have, which I agree we should all have. And I think that makes more sense than not. Some things get easy, but this is much more involved. And Councillor Hopkins, you can shake your head no, but I say that it doesn't respect council when this is, and colleagues at committee, when this is put forward at this very last moment. I don't think that's appropriate, and I don't think it shows regard. And it may well be worth supporting, but to have it put to us like this, I have a challenge with that.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? And I would be looking for a seconder to this motion. Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, just a brief comment, and I won't be nearly as passionate as the mayor. I respect where Councillor Plaza's concerns are with regard to committee quorum, but I just think it's appropriate to remind all colleagues that we can certainly send something to our committee clerk and ask that it be circulated to all members. And then we're not breaking quorum, and it gives people a little bit of time to digest something that's pretty significant and give it a chance to percolate in, have some thought, perhaps ask some questions of staff in advance of the meeting so that we know what the impacts of this would be. I don't know if, and I'm going to just say, I noticed that Ms. Scher had her hand up, so she might be able to enlighten us a little bit on that, on what's coming forward. But it is difficult, and I've said this at other, and mea culpa. I know that there's been times I brought motions forward on the floor of a meeting too. But when we can, I think it is important that we give some advance notice to these things so that they can be considered. An amendment as we go is one thing, but a whole new motion is another. That said, I support absolutely what's in here. Makes a lot of sense to me that we would be heading in this direction, but it would have been more helpful if I'd have been able to read this morning or last night rather than as it appears right in the middle of the meeting.
Ms. Scher, would you like to weigh in here?
If I may, Chair, not into the procedural elements of how things are coming to committee, but just to let council or committee know, this is the motion formalizes it and puts a sort of on the record as doing the work, but understanding the implications of construction in this area, both in the nearer term sense as well as the longer term work on the Clark Road Bridge, we absolutely will be undertaking the scope of work. Certainly having that direction and accountability with the public and council is not a bad thing at all, but we are not being asked to do anything here that we would not anticipate.
Thank you. Do I? Councillor Cassidy.
So I agree with a lot of the comments so far. I do think that we should circulate if we know we have a formal motion that's already written out and it's written in clerk language and everything. That means it's ready to go. And we could, last night at Planning Committee, we received a number of communications from outside sources via email, and we read those as we were conducting the meeting, which is a little bit irregular, but it does happen. So this was written and ready to go. We could have had an email sent to us this morning, and I would have appreciated that as well. After hearing from the city engineer that this is work that would be undertaken, I don't think it hurts to formalize it as part of the overall direction that we're going with this particular item. I'm fine to second it. It's not adding extra work to staff. It's not changing anything but I hope that the councillors have heard, and I'm definitely not the one to say we can never bring a last minute motion. I agree with Councillor Hopkins. That's what committee is for. It's for us to sort of go through the messy stuff so that when we get to council, it's fairly clean. But when we do have it written in advance, I do agree that it's easier for committee to have advance notice of that.
Your Worship.
So, Chair, I'm going to stay on this a little bit longer for just a moment here. Yes, it's messy, but it doesn't have to be this messy. And it's messy when we don't have sufficient prep. This is a great place and the appropriate place to have the kind of dialogue. Let's know what it is that we're debating, dialoguing. And when this is given to us at the moment, I hear what the city engineer has said. There may be subtleties in there that we might like to amend, change. I don't know, because this is more than just a very last minute pop in. And by the way, we're even given to us this morning. We never set rules around how soon and when these things should be in our purview. But for goodness sakes, I think to show courtesy amongst ourselves in all committees, we have to start taking a stand on these things. And it's not to say we're not going to get to the right place. I made that point earlier. But it seems to me if we want to respect each other as colleagues, what we must do is we must get to a point where we are limiting later, last minute, 12th hour type of motions. Show more consideration is all I'm saying. I supported the last motion that has come in very recently now, but this is that amendment, but this is a full motion. And frankly, it may well deserve the attention that even we're giving it now, but we're debating today right now process. We're not even debating the thoughtful discussion of the issue itself, because I think at this stage, how this has been approached is not the way that we're better than that. And I think we need to be able to ensure that we have that kind of information in advance so we can show the public we are as well. Thanks, Chair, I'm done.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be going to Councillor Van Holst, but I'll look to any comments from committee members before I go. Councillor Lewis. Sorry, Councillor Van Holst. I'm just going to put you on hold there. I'm going to let Councillor Lewis speak first.
Thank you. So I just want to comment briefly on the substance of the motion and a question, and I guess this might be to the to Councillor Hopkins through the mover, or however we want to proceed with this, Chair. But reading this through, one of the things that I'm not seeing in here, and I'm questioning whether it's something that needs to be considered, whether it's something that staff will just do automatically, is that there's no language in here about also applying our climate emergency action plan lens to these sorts of reviews of the environmental impacts. So I'm wondering if that's something that needs to be considered in this process, if it's something the staff will do automatically, how when we're talking about environmental impacts and environmental sustainability, where does the climate emergency action plan come into play?
Is that a question to staff, Councillor Lewis?
I don't know whether staff can respond to that, whether the mover can respond to that. But if somebody can provide some insight, I'd appreciate that.
Ms. Scheer, do you want to address Councillor Lewis's questions, concerns?
Respectfully, Chair, I believe Councillor Hopkins had her hand up, so I'm not sure what the proper order is.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I was going to go to staff for that answer.
Oh.
Thank you. And Ms. Scheer, I went to you for a reason, and thank you for consideration. But
so thank you very much for the question, Councillor. Certainly, all of the considerations related to climate change and the environment are part of an environmental assessment process. They're baked into the work that's done and the results that come out of it. We have not been specifically using the lens, as that tool is still being developed, but a lot of the content of the lens is already available internally for our work, and it has been part of these discussions and will continue to be. So you should expect to see us report out with that close to the end of the year on the more formal structure of the new lens. But for a project like this, it's intrinsic to the work that our consultant has done and that staff will use as we move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Scheer. We have a mover and a seconder. Are there any other? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Van Holst. You wanted to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, just another comment about the procedure. So this is a motion I haven't seen because it wasn't emailed to me, just the committee members. But I'd point out that if it is available, it's also valuable because to people who aren't on the committee, because someone might have seen it and then decided to attend the meeting to a comment. So that's also a consideration for these things. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with the mayor. I won't be supporting this motion. I think it helps all of us if we have a little more time. This is an important subject. This can come back to council and we could have a little more information and more opportunity for dialogue on this. So I won't be supporting this motion currently. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Cassidy.
So seeing that there is a chance that this motion won't pass, seeing that it's important, even though it is somewhat unnecessary because staff will do this work anyway. I'm going to withdraw my second. I think the councillor needs to bring this forward as an amendment to council. I think the amendment needs to be circulated to all of council with a preamble for why it's important, with some so that council can understand the issue. And I'm looking forward to seeing it come as an amendment, but I don't want it to see defeated today and then have to go through the process of overturning the committee recommendation at the council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. Any other comments or questions before we move on to other consent items? Seeing none, I'm going to weigh in here. I think, yeah, this has devolved into a procedural conversation. And I think it's one we have to be aware of because I'm glad Councillor Cassidy found a way out here because I think we would be there. On the face of it, I see value in what Councillor Hopkins is bringing forward. However, as has been said amongst other members of the committee, I would like time to learn about this, to talk to staff, to see if this motion is needed, etc. So I think Councillor Cassidy has provided us a way out because now Councillor Hopkinson raised this as amendment in council, and by that time we would have had time to study it a bit more. So thank you all for your comments on this. We will now move on to consent item 2.5 as the appointment of a consulting engineer for the Wellington Gateway Transit and Municipal Infrastructure Improvement. Do I have a mover to receive this? Councillor Cassidy, and a seconder? Councillor Lewis, and I will open the floor for comments or questions. Councillor Cassidy.
Just want to point out that the highlights presented in the report. There's 100-year-old infrastructure under the ground. It's getting paid for in the majority by the other levels of government, and even on this particular part of the project, coming from the tax levy is about $122,000. The remainder of the millions of dollars of this project are coming out of the public transit infrastructure stream and the and some coming from reserve funds, but from the tax levy, $120,000. Good value to see 100-year-old infrastructure replaced in the City of London.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, then I will go to the vote, beginning with the Mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen.
No.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-1.
We'll move on to consent item 2.6, and that's the appointment of a consulting engineer for the East London Link Transit and Municipal Infrastructure Improvement. Do I have a mover? Your Worship, seconder, Councillor Cassidy. Comments or questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the project from the rapid transit improvements that one of the legs that survived, and I supported it at the time it came to council. I have some questions about it now as we're moving forward and starting to talk about appointing an engineering consultant. And I continue to look at the design. I'm mindful of the fact that last night at Planning Committee, the committee received the Argyle Regeneration Study, the preliminary first report there. There's apprehension from Argyle residents about how the old psychiatric hospital lands are going to be redeveloped. And something that I shared with the committee last night was there's concern from residents that this is all going to be out-facing from the Argyle neighborhood, that it's all going to go Oxford and Highbury, it's all going to be Fanshawe College focused. And then this comes before us today, and in terms of the transit corridor servicing, that's exactly what we're seeing, is facing out from Argyle and pushing things towards Oxford and Highbury rather than into the Argyle community for service. I'm also concerned about the cancellation by LTC this year of planned service expansions that we're going to be providing some better service to Argyle residents and ultimately connect to this transit corridor. We don't know what Fanshawe College is going to look like in terms of students on campus in the fall. We know that the business case for this link was heavily predicated by student ridership numbers. So through you to our staff, I'm hoping that I can ask a couple of questions here. And I do note that in the report it says working with Fanshawe College to design and integrate transit terminal stop within the college site. Of course, Fanshawe College has to be part of this discussion, but have we had any discussion with Fanshawe about their expectations around campus attendance this fall and how that may impact transit ridership? Have we started to look at the impacts of COVID on transit in terms of moving ahead with these projects? Because I have real concern that if the Fanshawe population isn't on campus, this particular transit link could become very much a white elephant. I'd also like to know
here
if we've had discussions with LTC about when their tentative service enhancement plans might be rescheduled so that it will coordinate with the construction timelines laid out in this plan, which is 2022 to 2024. So I'm just hoping I can get some response from staff in terms of what they've looked at in terms of how this particular transit line might be impacted by the changing reality of our last 7 months.
Ms. Dan, I will go to you on that one, or Ms. Chair.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'll start and I'll flip it over to Ms. Dan if I've missed anything in terms of the details. This is a very unprecedented time, as much as that phrase is overused and end up getting a bit trite, in terms of trying to plan any sort of civic services, whether that's swimming pools, hockey, transit, education, any public services that are provided. That said, this is an investment that will serve the community for decades to come. So certainly what the next 7 months or years needs might be should not necessarily predicate what the long-term needs will be. Every city is planning transit recovery with the expectation there will be a need for public transit to serve major destinations, including post-secondary institutions. I understand the sensitivity around the psychiatric lands, but this service being close to the former hospital lands actually provides an opportunity to reduce traffic impacts on streets that would provide normally vehicle access to those locations. So I do think the right direction is to continue with the routes as planned, as certainly any changes to those routes would mean this project cannot proceed. It would mean a new environmental assessment and a restart of the work. That's not something that we're likely able to do within the current funding opportunities. Further to that, we've had many discussions with transit. They've spent a lot of the last time really working on how they're going to operate currently during COVID, but they are very aware of the need to think about what happens after COVID. I wouldn't suggest that the planned service expansions in Argyle are canceled. I believe it's more likely that they're deferred in the context of the financial reality, low ridership, and the need to physically distance. So we would strongly recommend this is the logical next step in terms of proceeding with what council has directed us to do when these projects were submitted for approval. And I also would remind a committee that this is not the last conversation we'll ever have about where we need our highest order of transit. So there's always opportunities for us to discuss and expand express routes or even dedicated lanes at some point in the future as we see communities' needs evolve.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis, I'll go back to you and then I will go to the mayor.
Yeah, so hopefully a quick follow-up on that. I appreciate all that feedback from Ms. Scher, and I recognize that sticking with our longer term plans makes sense in terms of we don't really know where COVID is taking us at this time. I guess my question is, and this has always been one of my challenges with this particular route, you know, we have not planned anywhere for a park and ride facility. I continue to believe that if our rapid transit system is going to be used, we have to recognize that there are people who only commute by transit for part of their route if we want to get new riders. We are not going to have people from Argyle who are going to take necessarily neighborhood routes to get to the rapid transit line. So, and understanding, and I see in the report, there will be, you know, engagement with public stakeholders, the BIA, which is great, landowners, interested individuals. I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of what the report back timelines look like for our engineering consultant on this in terms of when those next conversations happen. I'm just wondering where there might be an opportunity for not changing the route, but looking at how the route is integrating with the community. What's our general sort of timeline out over the next year and a half as we approach that 2022 mark?
Ms. Scher? Can you unmute yourself, Ms. Scher?
Oh, I think that's the first time I've done that. Sorry. So certainly, I had a really good answer too, and now I forgot it. Certainly the detailed design process is that opportunity to really work with the community on how this particular route is designed to serve East London. And there's an ongoing conversation through the Transportation Master Plan about what other complementary services might be required. While we are not proposing a park and ride right now on the east side, that doesn't mean it's precluded in the future, whether it's on a feeder route or it's on directly on one of the major routes. So I think the door is open. I certainly will turn this over to Ms. Dan to talk a bit about project schedule and when she would anticipate consultation and some of the design milestones being met.
Thank you. Your worship.
I think actually, Mr. Chair, Ms. Dan had unmuted herself there. Sorry, Your Worship. If staff had a comment on the timeline.
She outranks me. It's all good.
Ms. Shearer, we'll go back to you. I jumped to the mayor too quick.
I'm going to defer to Ms. Dan to provide some details on the design schedule and when milestones around consultation and various completions will be available and how we'd intend to report them.
Thank you, through the chair. So we're still on track in terms of this assignment to be able to hit our timelines in the business case, which was to start construction in 2022. As we move through detailed design, we'll spend the next probably 4 to 5 months doing preliminary design, and that'll help us to be able to determine our staging within that project. It's almost 7 kilometers of work to be able to do and revitalizing those roads. So we'll be getting into detailed design, starting with our staging, and then from there we'll re-engage with all of those different property owners along the route that we've met with through the EA to help figure out how to best integrate the project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dan. Councillor Lewis, are you good? Okay, then we'll go to the mayor.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think Councillor Lewis makes some very thoughtful points, and I think to the extent that we can incorporate support as we're able to through to Argyle makes practical sense, notwithstanding what is currently in front of us. But if it gives Councillor Lewis a little bit of comfort in terms of the potential for Fanshawe being a white elephant, I think that was from a student pickup delivery standpoint, maybe a bit more comfort in the fact that construction won't start until 2022, according to the project status schedule report that I have in front of me here. And so I think with respect to this, I think that deals with a lot of concerns as it relates to what we're dealing with through this pandemic and how we will be integrating students on the buses, which we even know right now, as of August 19th, we are going to be doing the front load entry according to the LTC CEO, general manager. So that's already pending. And as we move through this, I think that will happen sooner than later. That's from the standpoint of getting that traffic. So I don't predict the white elephant. And of course, we all hope it won't be. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions before we go to the vote? Seeing none, then I would like to call the vote, beginning with the mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen. Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Apologies, no.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-1.
Thank you. Now that concludes the consent items. There are no scheduled items nor items for direction. There is a deferred matters list. I would look for someone to make a motion to receive that. Councillor Cassidy, seconder. Councillor Van Meerbergen, any comments or questions? Seeing none, then I will call the vote. Your worship.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, folks. I will look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Cassidy, and hand vote, all in favor. It's unanimous. Thank you.
Bye.